There is good news being reported strategically and tactically by the United States government, and here's why. Kharg Island, the same way that the Strait of Hormuz is the jugular vein for the world's lifeblood of energy, right? And that's why it was such a concern that it seems that they had the jump on taking advantage of that geographic location. And they have been expanding their efforts to keep it that way. But Kharg Island, okay, which is about 20 miles based on which part of the Iran coast you're looking at, off that coast. So very easily reached with many different types of munitions, even though 20 miles, you think, well, that's something. Not with modern military-grade weapons. That's why they're trying to take care of the capabilities, but it's tough to limit a military with as much level and capability as Iran's, as the regimes, at that distance. But, this island is everything for their oil production. Okay, and it is the only island among the little chain that exists there of islands that has any kind of strategic importance because of the surrounding depth of the island. Kharg Island is a raised coral reef formation. It has very deep water. What does that mean? Bigger boats can get close to it. So if you take that from Iran and you hold control of it, it gives you two things. One, it chokes their ability to send energy anywhere. So the idea that they're going to up their relationship with China or increase exports is off the table. Secondarily, it gives us a reasonable and somewhat nerve-settling rationale for bringing Marines into the region. There is now news that an MEU is being brought in, a Marine Expeditionary Unit, usually somewhere around 2,000 to 2,500 troops. Now, why? I thought there were no boots on the ground. Well, we don't know what they're going to be used for, but if they're going to be used to secure Kharg Island, which is very easily targeted from the air, especially by IDF and U.S. supremacy in the air, Iran doesn't even really have an air force. That would be a huge strategic location and would also triangulate efforts to secure the Strait of Hormuz. What is not as good of an approach, and of course this is an opinion, but there's a factual basis behind it, is the idea that the American government is going to put up a $20 billion insurance policy so people will feel confident to go through the region, I think lacks foresight financially and politically. Why? It's not enough money, but it is a lot of money, especially when you have economic pressures at home, and it's not a good investment for the American government. Why? Because there's a good chance somebody's going to get hit if they go through the strait the way it is right now. Between the drones and light marine capabilities, remember the USS Cole in the Port of Aden in that area and what they did to blow up that ship. They brought a ski boat up alongside of it and exploded it. Now, protocols have changed, and you don't let people get that close. And even the cargo ships have different kinds of capabilities now, let alone if they have an escort. But see, this amount of information that I was allowed to give you at the top of the show helps frame a reason for optimism, a reason that maybe they do have a plan. Maybe there is going to be a change in the state of play, because let's be honest, while the president announced today that on his direction, they have pounded the most targets and diminished military capabilities, let's assume all of that is true. Okay, so then why worry? Because the regime doesn't seem worried. The Secretary of War says they're desperate. Okay, but their desperation has yielded them at least a strategic advantage right now, because they are choking off the world's oil supply. And for how long? Pounding their military capabilities should shorten the duration, but has not seemed to shorten their determination and has not changed their messaging. So unless everything that's coming out of them can't be believed because all of their leadership is gone and the regime is in tatters, as the Secretary of War would have you believe, they don't seem to be in any state of desperation in terms of wanting to negotiate, wanting this to stop. If anything, they are increasing the inflammatory nature of their rhetoric. Now, could that be a masochistic intention? Yeah, they're crazy zealots who are desperate for martyrdom as part of their messaging. Now, I don't think the leadership is. You know, that's a unique feature of these religious extremists, is that they talk about making martyrs, but they're not crazy to do it themselves, okay? So maybe the leadership, having taken the losses they have, would come around, but we've seen no indication of that. That's why people are worried. because the information that is coming out from around the administration fights the messaging of the administration. Listen to the Secretary of War.
We know the new so-called not-so-supreme leader is wounded and likely disfigured. And as the world is seeing, they are exercising sheer desperation in the Straits of Hormuz. Something we're dealing with, we have been dealing with it, and don't need to worry about it.
I do need to worry about it. Of course we have to worry about it, okay? Well, what kind of student of history is the secretary? He knows better than this. He put his life on the line as one of the many that we now hold regret with that sacrifice because of what it yielded in that region, what it did to so many, what it meant back home year after year after year in what was supposed to be a relatively rollover adventure in the beginning in Iraq. So, of course, there's reason for worry. To allay worries, what do? You give comfort of information and of confidence. How do you do that? Consistent messaging. I've said this before, I'll say it again. This administration has one messenger that can get through to the base in a way that consistently gives them comfort as measured by the polls. And it is the President of the United States. He is not well served by the people around him in terms of messaging and the reverberated confidence in the American people. We see that in the coverage. We see that in the polling. The more the president owns this situation and speaks to the American people, the better served he will be if his intentions and his planning are legitimate. Now, let's discuss the implications of this latest reporting. I've given you the context. If it's about Kharg Island, okay, that could be a very strategic move that we're hearing about with these Marines. Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.